In this video, we're going to cover the most common constructions that you'll find on the SOL. The first one we're going to cover is a line segment congruent to a given segment. This is probably the easiest construction out of all of them. The first step is we just make a point. The next step is we take our compass. So the compass can be found next to the dot tool. The dot's how I made my point. And to move the compass around, we drag the cross part, and we're going to put it on one endpoint. We're going to put it on A, and we're going to extend the compass to point B. So to extend it, we touch the back of the compass, so we can move it in and out. We can move it around in a circle. So we're going to try to put the center of it right on B, and I'm going to lock it. You may have hit the front of the compass if you're following along with me. The front of the compass will draw an arc, and it can draw all the way up to a circle. Now I'm just going to move the cross to the center of the point, and I'm going to draw an arc. I'm going to put a point somewhere on that arc, and I'm going to make a line. So this is the straight edge tool. We can use tool 1, which will move the line in and out, or tool 2 is the one that I like to use whenever we have points. So since we already have points that we're connecting, this is a good one to use. So I just connect the 2 points, and what I have are congruent line segments. So those 2 segments are congruent. We're going to do the next one now, which is constructing a perpendicular bisector. So to do that, I have to erase everything on the page. Unfortunately, there is no good way, or no way that I'm aware of, where you can just erase everything at once. Hopefully that's something they'll add in the near future. Alright, so on to step 2, or construction 2. A perpendicular bisector to a given line segment. So we have segment AB. What we're going to do is put our compass on A and B, and we're going to extend our compass just a little bit over halfway. So we're over halfway right now. So we should have an arc like this. I'm purposely going to draw them a little bit bigger because I'm not exactly sure where they'll be. And when I intersect it, so I move my compass, notice it's locked, move it over to the other endpoint, and I have 2 arcs. Now on the SOL, you'll see little arcs like these ones drawn here where they're connected. The big idea is where 2 arcs intersect, we're going to draw a line through it. Let me say that again because it's very important. Where 2 arcs intersect, we're going to draw a line through it. This time I'm going to use tool 1. Tool 1 has a point. So I'm going to make sure my point touches or goes through the intersection of the arcs. So what I constructed was a perpendicular bisector. If we use our vocabulary, perpendicular means I formed a 90-degree angle. Bisector means I bisected AB, so that's the midpoint. So we also did number 3. This point right here is the midpoint. So we've just done all 3 things on this page. Let's go over to the next page, the next question as it is. For this one, the first thing we need to do is to make an angle congruent to a given angle. To do this, the first step is we draw a line. It doesn't really matter where the line is. I'm just going to use tool 2 to just draw a line. The next step is I take the compass. I can take it to really any length, and I put it on A. So I'm going to lock the compass. It's very important that you lock it. And I'm going to make sure it goes through both sides of the angle. Then I'm going to move it over and do the exact same thing to the other side. So I'm going to make sure it goes through here, and my new line is going to go somewhere up around here. I'm going to make sure it's big enough that my new line is going to go through it. The next step is I move my compass over to where it intersected the line. This is the only time we're going to move our compass in or out. So notice I unlocked it and I moved it in. Then I make a little mark to emphasize that I made my compass that length. So I move it over, and I'm going to make sure that my arcs intersect. So hopefully we remember from the perpendicular bisector part that where two arcs intersect, we're going to draw a line through it. So this is my new vertex, and it goes through those intersected arcs. So notice the two arcs intersected right at this point. My line goes through that point, and I've just copied an angle. So again, if that was too much, maybe you missed a step, make sure to watch that again. And now we're going to move on to the next part, which is bisecting an angle. So we're going to bisect an angle. I think that copying an angle or making an angle congruent to a given angle is the most difficult construction. I think bisecting an angle is one of the easiest ones. So again, I put my compass on point A, and I'm going to go through it on both sides. Then I move my compass up to where it intersected. I'm going to draw it again. Move it to the other side. And I'm going to connect it. So where the two arcs intersect, remember, I'm going to draw a line through it. Notice that I did not move the compass in or out. The only time I really move the compass in or out is whenever I'm copying an angle. So since I'm bisecting an angle, I need to go down to the vertex A and make sure that it goes through it. So I've bisected an angle. Remember the word bisect. That means that this part of the angle is going to be congruent to this one. I cut it into two equal parts. The other type of questions that come up quite often are these things right here, where we have to make a line parallel to a given line through a given point. So we're going to do the first one. So we're going to construct parallel lines. Whenever we do this, point B is not going to help us at all. To show how little point B is going to help us, I'm purposely going to make a line that does not go through point B. Remember, this line is not going through point B, it's going through point A. You should remember in our lesson from parallel lines that whenever I have corresponding angles that are congruent, the lines will be parallel. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy an angle to make sure that I have parallel lines. So these are just the same exact steps we used for copying an angle. The first thing I do is make sure it goes through both sides of the line. That's not a very good line because I don't want it to go through A. There's nothing wrong with it, but I don't want to confuse you by doing that. So let me make this a little bit shorter. So this is not going through A, it's not going through B. So I'm not going to cross these lines either because I'm just copying an angle. This is one side of my angle right here where the line was extended. Now I move my compass to where it was, and I'm going to extend the compass to make sure it reaches out here. So the compass is this long. Since I'm copying an angle, I'm going to do the exact same thing. And make sure it goes up to where it intersected, and now I have intersecting arcs. Where the arcs intersect, I'm going to put a line through it. So the line's through it, and I can extend it because I use tool 1. And what I have are parallel lines. So remember, the symbol for parallel lines were these triangles that were colored in. So I have parallel lines because I constructed corresponding angles that were congruent. It's a very good vocabulary reminder of our lesson on parallel lines. So what I'm going to do now is delete all these lines. And we're going to go on to the second one, which is a line perpendicular to a given line through a point on the line. So the point that's on the line is point B. So I'm going to make a perpendicular line that goes through point B. In the last example where we made parallel lines, point B was not used. In this one where we're going to make perpendicular through point B, point A is completely irrelevant. The first step here is I put my compass on point B. I need to have two segments that are equidistant from point B. So there's one and there's two. Then all I need to do is create perpendicular bisectors from those 2 points. So what I'm going to do is extend it past halfway, so I have to extend it a little bit. Now, on a lot of different things, you only see people make the top part. I'm also going to make the bottom part of this arc. Hopefully I made those long enough. I go over to the other side, arcs intersect, and they intersect again. So again, that was just a perpendicular bisector. When I made parallel lines, I copied an angle again. This time I'm using a perpendicular bisector. Now I have two arcs that intersect. Remember, that means I'm going to draw a line through it. And since I constructed this correctly, you'll notice that this also goes right through the middle of point B. That tells me that I did it correctly. And finally, you should notice that this looks like it's 90 degrees. So there we go. I've made a line perpendicular to a given line through a point on the line. Once again, if you weren't able to follow along with that, make sure that you rewind the video, pause at any time you're unsure where a line came from. The best way to make sure you know how to do these is to just practice repeatedly. So now we're going to do the last construction that we're going to cover on this video, which is a line perpendicular to a given line through a point not on the line. So to do this, it's going to be the same steps as we used whenever we bisected an angle. So again, it's through a point not on the line. So the point not on the line is point A. So you might be wondering, why would we use the same steps to bisect an angle? If you think about it, this line right here, this is a straight angle, so it's 180 degrees. We're going to cut that in half to make a perpendicular line. So it's like we're bisecting a 180 degree angle. So the first step is we make sure that our lines go through it. I believe I still have the construction up from the last one. Remember, we put our arc through both sides of the angle. This time we do the same exact thing where our arc goes from point A, the point off the line, and it hits both of these. So it looks like my compass readjusted. So let me get the correct setting. Let me make sure I center it. So it's the same line and move it over. Same line. So I move it down to where the arc intersected the line. I'll make a larger arc there. So the last thing I do is just connect the dots. It's going to go through here, and remember, it's from point A. So it goes through point A right there. Don't be worried about that it did not go through point B. Remember, point B has nothing to do with this part of making a perpendicular off the line because it's on the line. Well, I hope these 6 or 7 constructions, I believe we did 7, were helpful enough. And please watch the other videos for more tips on the SOL.